Welcome to the Daily AI News Digest for July 23, 2026. This explainer broadcast is sponsored by bestai.org. Today, the global AI ecosystem is solidly in a highly capital-intensive consolidation phase. As we'll see from today's market actions, top-tier industry players are moving aggressively to secure physical computing capacity and lock down specialized enterprise-grade AI platforms. Let's look at today's market realities.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to cover the biggest market moves today, look at some new product and model realities, and then sift through the latest regulation, policy, and business signals. Finally, we'll break it all down in the analyst take, wrapping up with our forward market watch.
Starting off with our biggest market moves today, focusing heavily on corporate infrastructure actions. The defining number of the morning is $5 billion. In a highly strategic bid to challenge NVIDIA's market dominance, Advanced Micro Devices, AMD, has finalized a comprehensive partnership with Anthropic. We're looking at a commitment of up to a $5 billion strategic equity investment from AMD into the developer of the Claude model family. Let's break down the factual hardware realities of this deal. Under this agreement, Anthropic is set to deploy up to 2 gigawatts of computing capacity by the first half of 2027. Now, to put that sheer scale into perspective, 1 gigawatt of compute capacity is roughly equivalent to the total power output of a single nuclear reactor. This massive capacity will be powered by AMD's next-generation Instinct MI455X GPUs, which are going to be integrated right into AMD's Helios rack-scale systems. And in return for this equity injection, Anthropic is committed to purchasing tens of billions of dollars in AI servers directly from AMD over the contract's term. Now, this isn't an isolated event. It builds directly on Anthropic's broader compute portfolio strategy. They've maintained a very strict approach to sourcing computing capacity from multiple hardware providers, purposely avoiding reliance on any single chip supplier. So this AMD deal sits alongside their existing AWS Trainium commitments, which have been backed by roughly $8 billion since 2024. Add that to their previous capacity agreements with Google, NVIDIA, and even SpaceX for data center capacity, and it's clear Anthropic is systematically diversifying its physical infrastructure. Moving on to Section 2, Product and Model Realities, specifically looking at API pricing and technical specs. Google has officially rolled out updates to its production models. Examining their new production economics, Gemini 3.6 Flash is being positioned as the mainstream workhorse. It keeps that 1 million token context window, but lowers the output pricing to $7.50 per million tokens. Early testing indicates it uses about 17% fewer output tokens than its predecessor on the Artificial Analysis Index. Running alongside it is Gemini 3.5 Flash-Lite. That one targets high-volume scale, pushing up to 350 output tokens per second, and it's priced very aggressively at just 30 cents per million input tokens. Google also announced a highly specialized model today, Gemini 3.5 Flash Cyber. This one is specifically fine-tuned to discover, validate, and patch software vulnerabilities. But it is essential to note that you can't just go get self-serve access to this. It's strictly restricted to governments and trusted partners through a limited pilot program they're calling CodeMender. It's a very measured, tightly controlled approach to deploying advanced cybersecurity capabilities. Now, what's really interesting is the pricing structure for Moonshot's new flagship multimodal reasoning model, Kimi K3. A standard input token cache miss will run you $3 per million tokens through their official API. But on a cache hit, that price drops down to just 30 cents per million tokens. That is a massive 90% cost reduction on those cache hits. Output tokens, however, remain priced quite heavily at $15 per million. The defining structural reality of Kimi K3, though, is its sheer scale. We are talking about a 2.8 trillion parameter model with a 1 million token context window. And unlike the previous generation K2.5, K3 is completely closed. It is not open weight, you can only access it via API. Its raw weights are estimated to be right around 1.4 terabytes. That means it is simply far too massive for any single GPU and requires heavily distributed inference just to operate. Next up, Section 3, Regulation, Policy, and Business Signals, focusing on institutional and sovereign investments. We actually have another $5 billion figure hitting the tape today. The White House, in tandem with the Department of Energy, has formally announced the allocation of up to $5 billion in funding for what they're calling the Genesis mission. This is a massive, multi-agency federal initiative squarely designed to leverage AI for scientific discovery and national security. Breaking down where that federal capital is actually flowing. Of the first 278 project awards, 168 are being led by universities, and 87 are led by national laboratories. Only 19 are led by private companies. This distribution starkly highlights a very heavy reliance on academic and national lab infrastructure to actually execute the government's long-term science objectives. The specific national challenges targeted by this funding span grid scaling, materials design, and autonomous laboratories. The largest single award so far is a $60 million investment applying AI directly to nuclear energy facilities. Other funded projects are zeroing in on critical mineral extraction and real-time plasma control for commercial fusion energy. The overarching goal here is to effectively double America's scientific productivity.
Shifting gears to private business signals. Natural AI, a San Francisco-based payments infrastructure startup, just closed a $30 million Series A round. This round was led by Forerunner and brings their total funding to over $40 million in less than a year.
What Natural is attempting to build is agentic payment infrastructure. The mechanics essentially involve bridging the gap between traditional banking and autonomous software workflows. In their system, an AI agent identifies a vendor, a machine-to-machine payment is autonomously initiated, and then the funds are settled entirely over programmable rails. This all happens without requiring any human authorization for the final transaction.
Let's move into Section 4, the analyst's take, where we decode this capital reality.
The crucial point here is understanding the underlying structure of these mega investments. The AMD and Anthropic partnership we discussed represents one of the largest circular deals in recent history. By definition, a circular deal is an arrangement where hardware or cloud providers directly finance AI startups, but those startups are contractually obligated to return those exact funds as capital expenditures back to the investor. This closely mirrors the multi-billion-dollar arrangements we've previously seen between NVIDIA, Microsoft, and OpenAI. It keeps these massive capital flows securely circulating within closed, tightly controlled ecosystems.
Furthermore, when looking at the software and infrastructure side, we have to view the timeline very realistically. Regarding that $30 million natural AI funding round, lead investor Kirsten Green stated, quote, "Agent payments aren't yet a thing, but Natural has the team and ambition to build this new infrastructure," unquote. This is a very candid acknowledgement that while capital is certainly flowing heavily into machine-to-machine payment rails, the actual autonomous transaction volumes in the market today remain entirely negligible.
Synthesizing all these data points reveals a rather cold business reality. Capital expenditure on physical infrastructure heavily outpaces immediate market demand. Billions of dollars are currently being spent on gigawatt-scale data centers and massive chip acquisitions well before the software ecosystems, like these autonomous agent payments, have fully matured, let alone generated real end-user demand. The industry is essentially building the foundation right now, operating on the pure assumption that the commercial volume will eventually follow.
Finally, Section 5, our outro and market watch, looking at the forward outlook. Based on today's developments, institutional investors will be monitoring 4 key indicators moving forward. First, the actual enterprise adoption rates and migration volumes moving over to Google's Gemini 3.6 Flash. Second, the potential launch of any open-weight alternatives that might challenge Kimi's closed API K3 model. Third, tracking tangible commercial milestones emerging from the DOE's Genesis mission, particularly in that fusion energy space. And finally, monitoring natural AI's progress as they race to establish agentic payment rails before incumbents like Stripe inevitably deploy their own solutions.
Which brings us to the core business tension underlying all of today's news. Can these frontier AI laboratories generate sufficient organic enterprise demand to actually cover their multi-billion-dollar compute and server commitments completely independently once these circular funding models inevitably run their course?
That wraps up today's analysis. This explainer broadcast of the day's critical market moves is sponsored by bestai.org. Be sure to visit their site for further resources and deep dives. As we continue to watch this multi-billion-dollar arms race unfold, the ultimate question really does remain. When the guaranteed funding stops, will the enterprise demand be there to catch them? Thank you for joining us, and we will see you for the next digest.